Before we jump into today's episode, I just want to give a heads up that we talk about some pretty sensitive subjects. Nick was a survivor of 2 mass shootings. And so he goes into some pretty hard details of what those events were like. So if at any point you need to stop listening, please do. And please know that help is always available. Let's jump into it.
Photographer of the year, let's hear it for Dan Shelley, Shellda Photos.
Hello, welcome back to another episode of the Shellda Podcast, where today I'm joined by one of the media legends in the game that some probably know you if they've been around for a hot minute, and some may not, but will definitely have a respect for you after this episode. Nick Champion of Stealth Media, welcome to the podcast.
Good afternoon. Hey, guys. Nick Champion. Most people would know me better by just the media name I used to use, Stealth Media. Did a lot of paintball media stuff back in the mid to late 2000s, some of which got pretty well known. So, that's it to start. Yeah.
Well, so let's jump right into that. I think you were around the sport of when some would call like kind of the heyday of paintball, right? Where the Huntington Beach era, where like the stands were packed, we were giving away cars for, winning events. What was it like being in the media space around that time?
Not just the media, but just in general. Because I started playing, it was probably 2004, I think. And then I started doing the media stuff. So literally this is 20 years because the first video I ever filmed was basically 20 years ago, right before World Cup 2005. It was like
Wow.
Oakland Assassins and a team called Red Sedition, which not a lot of people now are going to remember. It's a good question because there, to some degree, there is that like essence of you don't know what you have sometimes until it's gone.
Yeah.
But I think actually a lot of us did understand, like we felt like there was just this crazy momentum and this, like you're saying, almost like this magical feel sometimes that the sport had back then, that some of us, I know I in a way felt it. And sometimes it was just a unique era. All the stuff that was going on. And I think one of the things that made it so special was things like we talked about the other day a little bit. The Greg Hastings like video game came out in the mid 2000s, and then the second one, and then PB Nation and all that stuff going on. It was like a very centralized time in paintball where everybody was on the same things and doing a lot of the same stuff. So you would it felt really unified. The sport felt really unified in that way. From a media perspective, the stuff we were seeing was just, I don't know, everything was just always really cool. I don't know what it was about the time and the players, whether it was pro teams or not. There was like a lot of teams, even in the divisional ranks, that were like just looked at as like really cool teams, even in Division 3, Division 2. There was just a lot of cool stuff going on all the time, it seemed like. And then, like, to answer your question more specifically, the media stuff, there was just a lot of stories and a lot of cool things happening, like Oliver Lang when he left Dynasty and then went to Ironmen, and the rivalries with like Joy Division and Dynasty and Excessive and Dynasty and all this stuff. There was just a lot of really cool stuff happening all the time. But I would say, I mean, to me, it felt special as it was happening. And then a lot of us would have that look or that viewpoint of now of like, man, we still, even though we all knew it was a really good time, didn't quite appreciate it, especially a lot of us were younger back then, just like kids that were just growing up. I think that's honestly part of what made it so special was that I think that like age 15 to 21 was like the dominant age demographic in the sport.
Yeah.
And I think we all just kind of like were growing up together with paintball as like the thing that unified all of us together, especially in Southern California. Like it was so big here, like in the Midwest, Chicago area, Florida, Texas, like it was one of the hubs, and so things were just, it was wild. It was
Yeah.
wild.
I mean, people were literally moving to California at that time to try to pursue a career in paintball. I think that's where you had some of the old players at the time who were switching gears into the new, pro leagues that were popping up. But then you had the young guys. You had, all the core guys on Dynasty, I think at that time were in their teens, maybe early 20s. I think you had mentioned the Oakland Assassins. I think that was right around when Tyler Harmon kicked off his pro career too, being like a teenager, a young kid, essentially.
Exactly. Yeah. And so actually Tyler is in the first video I ever filmed. He was in it. So
Wow.
kind of cool.
Okay, before we go any deeper into this podcast, I just want to give a quick shout out to a few show sponsors that mean so much to me. First and foremost, Hormesis. That's right. These guys have been with me since day one, episode 1. We're coming up on a year of this podcast. And so the partnership that I've had with Hormesis has meant the world to me. They've been doing a lot of drops recently. One that I really love are these sweatshirts. We're getting into that fall season here in Texas, and World Cup is just right around the corner, and it gets pretty chilly in the mornings. So I am super excited to, 1, pack my sweatshirt and also rock this around town. And then 2, ProDNA. I have been loving their backpack. As you can see, it's actually pretty dirty. I was at the field this past weekend using it, and it's perfect for some clothing. It's perfect for just some small things. If I'm giving away merchandise, sometimes I'll keep a few extra headbands in there. And the nice thing about that, before I go back to the office, I just spray it off and it looks brand new. So I can't say enough good things about my ProDNA backpack. And then last but not least, BFP gear. BFP gear has been absolutely crushing the game. For those of you that know about BFP gear, we're really close to that time of the year where they do some epic deals. BFP gear is known for doing some absolutely crazy Black Friday deals leading into the holiday season. So stay tuned to bfpgear.com and also head over to their Instagram account because they're going to be posting some teasers about this drop coming soon. And trust me, it's a sale that you're not going to want to miss. All right, back to the episode. Wow. So you had shared a few pictures from way back when. I'm going to pull one of them up now. The first one is I'll let you explain it, but just some context for people who are not watching on YouTube. It's whatever this picture is from. It's a rainy event. But the thing that stood out to me is everyone is rocking the old school JT, like the legendary pants that had the racing logos on it. But then I also looked a little closer, and is that you in the middle?
Yeah, the shortest one, the smallest one.
The shortest one there. You have a front beanie on with the lid or the visor that was that was huge in that era. So tell me about this picture.
It's like the Andy Kopkock specialty from back then. So actually this was a practice, and so I kind of skipped over the part things that people might know me by if they were around back then, if they don't remember the name Stealth Media. This picture is from the first day of the excessive Ironman practice that ended up being what's called the Pro Day video. A lot of people refer to it as. So this was 2 weeks before NPPL Huntington Beach, 2006. This was at a field called Paintball Fury, I think it was, in Acton, California, off the 14 freeway. This was Eric Felix's field, so he was an old pro. I honestly can't even remember what teams he played on, but he was coaching Excessive at the time, or one of the coaches that helped Excessive at the time. This was his field. Excessive, Ironmen, Sedition, and a couple other teams were all practicing, getting ready for Huntington Beach, and it started snowing because a storm came in. This was mid-March 2006, and this was maybe a month or so after I had just gotten my new camera.
Oh, man.
And this was the first, basically, this video ended up being the first 7-man footage of Oliver playing with Ironmen after he went over from Dynasty. Because the PSP Texas event had been probably a few weeks before, I think February, probably the end of February. So yeah, this was like me with a cover on my camera because nobody knew it was going to snow and rain, or nobody thought to check, and everybody was kind of just like looking at like what I was filming and like thinking like, oh man, it looks pretty sick with the snow. So yeah, this video along with probably one or two others are like the two or three that are the most kind of popular from back then that most people would know or remember.
Sure.
So
Wow.
yeah.
What a wild time to be weeks away from Huntington Beach and an iconic event, and here you are shooting and it's snowing. That's crazy.
Yeah, it was pretty wild in Southern California
Yeah.
in the
What a wild time.
springtime. Yeah.
And then I want to bring up a few more pictures. I think this is one from paintballphotography.com.
Yep.
This is, I mean, this is just a legendary picture too, right? Because there's the Balls can back when like Balls was a sponsor.
Oh yeah, I
There's,
forgot. I didn't even notice that in the picture. Yeah.
yeah, there's Gary Bombs. Like, tell me about this picture and why you sent it over.
Yeah. So there's a few like I told you, there's some that were on my old MySpace that I deleted that I really wish I had that I could have sent you because they were pretty cool. But I'm the one like over there on the right, the farthest right, basically, with
Right
the
here.
like red and blue flex. And I don't remember which day of the tournament this was. It probably was Sunday, based on how many people were on the field,
Yeah.
photographer wise. And yeah, Gary Baum right there, and a bunch of other Mike from Chrono 300's in there somewhere. The
How old
Traumahead,
were
you can
you
see the
in this?
Traumahead shirt right there that whoever that is wearing, film shooting for Traumahead. And you can, one of the reasons this picture is funny is because you can just clearly tell that I'm like a foot and a half shorter than everybody else on the field.
Yeah. How old were you in
Because
that picture?
so in this picture I would have been 14.
Holy smokes. So as a
Yeah.
14-year-old with a on the pro field shooting pro professional media is crazy.
Yeah, it was it all started because I watched like as soon as I got into paintball, started watching 300 feet per second,
Mm.
and then pretty soon after that, right when it came out, I got Serial Killers, Pat Spoder's movie, the monkey with the gun,
Yeah.
and I would watch videos like that. I had all the Durver videos and all that stuff, and I would just watch them all the time after school. I'd literally every day I would watch those videos, and I especially with like Serial Killers, the storytelling aspect of it. And I just kind of felt like I wanted to tell some stories too, of like me and my friends and like the sport and what was going on. I felt like I don't know, I just felt like I could do it too.
Yeah.
So that was where it all started. And when I first started, that would have been, I probably was 13, October 2005, when I filmed that first one with a little handy cam, like mini DV, with the little DVDs that are like this
Yep.
big that it records onto.
Yep.
Yeah, that's where it all that's where it all started. Yeah,
Wow.
just because I don't know, I just wanted to make some videos. I don't know, I just thought I could do it.
I think that was the hot thing during that era, right? Because we had a lot of skateboard videos that were popping up and other similar style sports. And if we go to like the modern version of today, it's almost like a kid saying, "I want to be a vlogger," right? I want to be a YouTuber. I think back then in the paintball era and skateboard era, it was, "Hey, I want to create these cool videos and like do a bunch of
Yeah.
mashups with some cool music."
Yeah, actually the skating thing, I didn't really think about that. That's probably the closest like parallel to it, because
Yeah,
they're kind of like different sports that weren't at the time like as mainstream. Skating at that time obviously was blowing up, but it wasn't at the point like it is now where it's like a mainstay where everybody really knows about it. Where
sure.
before it might have been mostly younger people. Paintball is kind of like that, but I think that like you kind of asked earlier, like what was it like? That like the heyday. There was less people for sure doing it than are doing it now, because it was
Yeah,
just the barrier to entry was higher, I think. And then you asked the question like what on the pro field, like what, because back then at that time in 2006, it wasn't the pro field at that time. It was just the NPPL field.
that's right. Yeah, because they had other divisions rotating throughout the weekend there. Yeah,
Yeah. So like on, especially I think more so on Friday, I can't really remember. It changed in 2007 where they started doing pretty much where the main field was, especially on Saturday, was semi-pro and pro only.
Yeah.
And then the Friday, some of the divisional teams would play on it. But then after that, but at that time, it was kind of every divisional team would have at least one game on the NPPL field, like, the center court. They like to kind of call it, just so you could kind of feel like you're in that center stage, at least one time during the tournament, which was kind of cool. And then it was interesting for me because I was so much younger than everybody that sometimes I kind of just like on the field, like I honestly really kept to myself quite a bit.
Yeah.
Because I just wasn't, I don't know, it was just hard to feel, everybody was cool to me. It's not like anyone was like mean or like, hey kid, like what are you doing here? It was just kind of like, I don't know, I don't really know these guys and they're older than me, so I'm just gonna do my thing a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, as a kid or young teenager, being in that realm, like you want to talk about intimidation. Holy smokes! Like I'm trying to imagine myself being 13 years old, going onto the NPPL field with a camera and being surrounded by a bunch of adults who would probably this is their career. That's got to be such a wild experience. Wow.
Yeah, in some ways, actually, because I was so young, I didn't even really think about it like that. It was kind of just like, I'm not really sure what's going on. Like, I was just trying to figure out how everything goes,
Yeah.
especially my first tournament, which was Huntington Beach. And there's actually a couple funny stories that kind of are along that line of like just not knowing what's going on. One was that, so back then, actually, to film NPPL with video, so photography was free. The passes were free, from what I remember. But video, you had to pay $1,500 to film at an NPPL event. I don't remember PSP how it worked because the only PSP events I filmed were for Pat Sporer, for Serial Killers 2. But for NPPL, you had to pay the $1,500, and then on the pass, I didn't realize this, but it would say on there that on Sunday you can't film the main center court field. And the reason they put that on there was just in case like a ESPN or like a Fox or like a big sports network wanted to come in and film, like, and it wasn't planned. They just said, oh, hey, we want to come film your event, that they could say, hey, we told you, like, it was in writing on your contract. You're not supposed to be able to film on the main field. I didn't know that. So my first NPPL tournament that I filmed, I thought that was just how it goes. So on Sunday, I didn't film on the main field at all. And this was the event where Excessive was like loaded with like Dave Baines and Glenn Takamoto. And they still had like John Richardson and obviously Thomas Taylor, David Williamson, Nikki Cuba, all the guys were on, and they were just loaded, and they beat Dynasty in the finals, and I didn't film it.
That's like the Huntington Beach event that people talk about.
Yeah, I didn't film it because I just took what it said on my like pass literally and didn't ask any questions because I was 14 years old and I didn't realize that's like they just do that for just in case. But yeah, you can go on the main field.
Wow.
So,
when did
funny.
you figure that out? That like you could have gone on?
After the tournament.
Oh,
yeah,
man.
After the tournament was over. I can't remember. I remember just talking to somebody, whether it was another media member or somebody involved with NPPL, I can't remember, but just someone finding out like, oh, that would have been cool. Yeah, pretty funny. And then my dad told me, because he was at the event and he would just kind of, he was into paintball too. He didn't play, but he was into it just from me playing all the time and filming and everything. And he would ask some of the other media guys at like around the tournament at Huntington Beach, like, oh, is he like, in your guys' way or not? And they were like, no, he's so short, I can just shoot right over him. They're like, nah, it doesn't matter. I can just either go around him or just take pictures right over the top of him. It's fine. Because I was probably like literally like 5 feet tall probably back then. It took me until
you could tell in that picture, you almost look like you were, I bet if you stood next to Kenny Rosenberg, you and him were probably almost.
We were pretty similar height. Yeah. Before I had my growth spurts in like end of high school and college. Yeah.
Yeah. And then, so you stepped away and then this year you came back for the first time in X amount of years. What was that like for you coming back into the paintball media space?
So, it is something that I had been thinking about basically ever since I left the sport, which would have been my senior year of high school. It was like 2009 or 10.
Wow.
And so, because the reason I stopped filming and making videos to begin with was I just wanted to play more. And that was kind of taken away from playing, I just wanted to play more and get better.
Yeah.
And then I quit the sport to go basically to make snowboarding like my new thing. That was what I did for a while, for some years after paintball. But it was always something like I wanted to eventually either come back and play again or come back and film again or both. Just it was going to be kind of be like when the time is right kind of thing. I always kind of still kept up with the sport, whether it was like from my friends on social media or like watching Major League Paintball, like some of the the games that are up on YouTube and stuff like that, just to kind of just see what's going on. I would kind of check in every now and then.
Sure.
But it was always something I was looking at as like someday I'm going to do that. So last year in 2024, in May, I started looking at cameras. And I'll tell you something funny about that after. But, and then by September, I had bought a bunch of gear. I got my friend who had been borrowing my tripod for like 15 years to mail it back to me from Texas or Tennessee. And then was pretty much, after doing tons of research, because like everything's totally different now from a technology standpoint. And then pretty much October 2024, I was ready to go. Came back and then filmed a practice of two like WCPPL Premier League teams,
Yeah.
the Bloodhawks and then LA Collision, and then filmed WCPPL the last event the next weekend. And then a few weeks after that, I filmed Dynasty and Aftermath before World Cup. At not their layout weekend practice, but the one before that, and then Aftermath again. And at the time, I was trying to figure out like how the media pass thing was going to work, because I was hoping for next year, so this season, to get back hopefully and be on the pro field, because I didn't know exactly even how that works. So shout out to you, and we can talk about this a little more after I finish answering this question with this long-winded response. But
You're good.
how your show is partially responsible for me getting back into the NXL Pro Media kind of, I don't know what you would call it, club, because of your episode with Alex Sorensen. So basically, that was the goal the whole time, was to come back and be on the pro field. And then so to answer your question, what was it like? It was pretty cool. Just pretty cool. Partly because it's almost like doing it again for the first time, because everything is so different now. And all the teams, even though it's kind of surreal to see, like when I first saw the Dynasty guys at that practice again, it was like insane to me that like they're still at the top level, and it's literally 20 years later, and they're still all insanely good at the sport. It was like
here
the same kind of thing, like a mixture of like that feeling, because all these guys that I haven't seen, and some of these guys, that were my buddies back in the day or that I knew, are still there. And then there's so many new people, and so much is so different that it was almost like kind of like the same thing. I was like trying to just figure out how all this stuff goes. I was like talking to some of my buddies, like Dave Quitman and Danny Lincoln, just kind of like about like, hey, what's the flow? Like how do things work now? Before I showed up, just so I could have an idea. But it was just the same thing of me kind of just having to feel out how everything goes again, and the format's different, the fields are different, everything's just different now. So it was just kind of a new learning experience. So, but a lot of fun, because getting to, know a bunch of new people now, and Cincinnati was when I met you officially for the first time in person. So a lot of fun.
Yeah, it was cool because I had heard your name, and we had chatted a little bit, but I'm like, man, the name just sounds so familiar. And like I went and looked it up. I was like, holy shit, like this is the guy. Like so many people don't know like all the stuff that you did back then. And then like once we finally met, it was so cool just kind of hover around the media space that weekend, because I just kept hearing people be like, hey, like, do you know who's back, like, hey, did you see Nick's over there? Like a lot of the OG guys like kept saying like coming up to you and like, hey, I didn't know like you're back. So
Yeah.
that had a really cool moment for you.
Yeah, no, it was. That part of it was really cool. Both media and players and stuff like that, talking to
Yeah.
people that I haven't seen in forever, or just people that I hadn't met before. I can't tell you how many times it's happened over the last year since I've come back, of like players that I didn't realize at the time, were playing back then that are pro now. Some of like the newer pros that they were playing back when my stuff was coming out, and they're like, dude, I used to watch your videos like every day, or like this and that, and like I loved your stuff back when I started playing or when I was playing in the 2000s, and just like, oh, it's cool to meet you finally, and it's cool for me to meet them, and because for me, like sometimes you don't really understand like how much your stuff, like how many people like it or watch it, or like obviously before I had the numbers of like how many downloads I was getting on the website. That's another thing that was different. It wasn't
Yeah.
YouTube back then. It was there's like a bunch of stuff. I have a list of stuff that's different now compared to back then. um but it's been really cool to see how many people remember that stuff,
Yeah.
and really like it. Not that it affected them per se, but like it was something that was important to them growing up in the sport or whatever you have. Actually, and Ronnie Dizon was um, a big one of the names that pops into my head when I think about that, because um, in 2022 I had a bunch of footage from NPPL Commanders Cup 2007 that I just never finished a video for, and it was
Yeah.
like on my like bucket list of things to finish, kind of like coming back. And I put that video out called the Time Capsule, kind
Yeah.
of exact 15 years after the event, basically. And one of his comments on there is actually one of the things that made me start looking at cameras again and start um, going and like doing research again on like what it's going to take for me to be able to film, and what equipment I need, what gear I need, how the cameras even work now, all that
Yeah.
stuff, because it was completely different. Everything was different back then.
Yeah.
Um, and he was a kind of a catalyst for that. You can find that comment on that video, I'm sure.
Oh,
It's pretty
for
cool
sure.
to see what he said. So yeah, like a lot of stuff like that has happened, and it's pretty cool to me. You know,
Yeah. It was so cool to just see you back out there. I mean, I just pulled up a picture for people that are not watching YouTube, and you're obviously a little taller, so like
yeah,
you're definitely have more of a presence on the field now. But it was cool to like go back and watch some of the old footage, and like I would see you on the sideline, and like your stance is still the same. Like how you go to set up for shots is like almost identical to what you used to do as a kid, and so it was
just
kind of cool.
taller.
Yeah, to come full circle.
Yeah, it's funny.
Yeah.
When I played again one time just for fun in like 2014, I think it was. One of the guys I used to play with, like during the game, he looked over and he was like, "You still have your form." He was like, "You still, you still look the same. Like your style is still the same. The way you hold your gun and do this and that." So I guess that never changes. I guess.
It's just like riding a bike.
Yeah, it's funny. It's funny how it goes. It is though.
Yeah, totally. Hey, let's switch gears and go a little bit deeper. When I've got a pretty amazing community. I call them the Shellda Squad. They're guys that are in my Discord, and the Discord just it's always popping. You're always talking about different guests and just things going on in paintball. And every once in a while, I'll be like, "Hey, do you guys have any recommendations for people I can bring on of someone who's got a story?" And one of the guys who's in there who I've met and become really, really good friends with over the past few years, David, he's like, "Hey, you've got to bring Nick on." And my first question, whenever somebody says you got to bring somebody on, is like, "Well, do they have a story?" And like, "And what's the story?" And he was like, "Oh, he's got a story." And then so we
Yeah.
side chatted a little bit about it, um, and it sounded like we'll get into that. But I think you guys had first met through Greg Hastings Paintball, like a long time ago. Is that right? Or there's a Greg Hastings tie-in somewhere in there?
There is. I think it was either that we met on the game or we met on what was called. So back then there was PB Nation, and then there was paintballforum.com, which was a smaller, like a little more tight knit, and just it never blew up like PB Nation did to the
Yeah.
level that PB Nation did. And so I think I had seen him on the forum before, and then we met on the game, And just like a bunch of other people I met on the game were kind of like, oh, wait, oh, you're on the forum too? Like, oh, and same thing with PB Nation, you know, names, people's usernames and all that. Yeah, so we met. I got that game Christmas 2005. So we would have met sometime in the winter of like 05, 06.
Yeah.
Or no, you know what it would have been? 04, 05. 04, 05. And we used to play together like every day on the game and talk on the forums and all this and that. So I've known Dave for literally 20 years or more than, yeah, more than
Wild.
20 years now. And he actually played a tournament with me at a field in Redlands in 2005 with me and a bunch of my friends that I played with for years. And I went up and visited him one time going to a NASCAR race at Sonoma,
Yep.
the speedway up there. Me and my dad went up there and I visited him and like stayed with him for a night and we played up at one of the fields up there. So yeah, I've known Dave for a long time and I actually didn't see him for sure over 15 years and then saw him at the Texas event and we talked for a while, which was awesome.
Gosh, what a
Um,
cool full circle moment, you know?
yeah, just to reconnect and talk to him, it was cool. And I didn't know he was a part of your Discord and all that stuff, so that's cool. That's cool too.
Yeah, it's crazy like how things tie in together, right? Because like, if you guys hadn't played together, you wouldn't have had that moment, 20 years later. And
Yeah,
then I wouldn't have had David wouldn't have told me about you and like what your story is. And so let's jump into that. And I think some people may know this, but I would assume majority don't. I think you were attending a 3-day festival back in 2017 in Las Vegas. I
yep,
think is when it happened.
yep.
And you were at that mass shooting in Las Vegas that was synonymous. I think it's still to this day the most catastrophic mass shooting in the history. I think right now in the U.S.
I believe so. Yeah, I haven't rechecked the data, but I think at the time that was something people were saying. Yeah, so
Yeah,
October 1st, 2017 was the date. Yeah,
talk to me about that if you're okay, like going into that a little deeper about that whole entire weekend.
yeah. So, um, some background. And back in college in 2013, I started going to like country bars and like to do like partner dancing, two step, and like line dancing and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And like my whole life kind of changed, like where I was, the community I was involved in, and the friends I had, and all this kind of stuff. The kind of stuff I was involved in was totally different before that, and I came kind of super just huge into that whole community, and that was like my one of my main, or probably the main hobby and thing I did for fun was like be a part of that community and go to country music, concerts and festivals and do all the dancing stuff and around different places in California. And so because of that, I found myself years later in Vegas, October 1st, 2017, day 3 of that Route 91 Harvest Festival is what they called it, was what the name was.
yeah.
Sunday night, Jason Aldean was headlining the third night. And yeah, so basically was in the crowd kind of near where the catwalk is, that pops out from the stage and comes out forward. And yeah, start hearing, a bunch of cracks and pops and everybody in the crowd, like at first doesn't really know what's going on. And then it seemed like all at once, everybody just kind of figured out what was going on, like, oh, those are gunshots. And like, this is what's happening right now. Like this is a real thing that's happening to us right now. Like we're getting shot at. Like we're in a mass shooting. Like this is happening. So that's how that kind of like began. At the time I was with 5 or 6 friends who were all like young girls that were, I want to say somewhere between like 21 and 22, 23. And at the time I was 25, I think 24, something like that. Um, and pretty much once the shots like started coming towards our side of the crowd, everybody, it was almost like a wave, like in, at a stadium, but in reverse, of everybody just like dropping to the floor all at once. Cause you could like feel that the shots were like getting closer to you. Because you could hear them hitting the ground, hitting metal, you could hear the difference between, hitting people and hitting other stuff, and that it was getting closer. And then I just kind of took a look around to try to just try and figure out like what was going on, where it was coming from. Um, And then pretty much in my head said like, okay, we're going that way. And my whole goal was basically just to try to get them and myself just out of that, as far away and out of that situation as possible. So people kind of broke open some of the fences on that side of the venue, kind of towards the Mandalay Bay was like to the southwest of the main stage or west of the main stage. And then we went out um, kind of like the east side through a gap in some of the fences. Um, yeah, so that was kind of that, and ended up I was just keeping them running, keeping myself running. We were hopping fences and doing this and that, running out in the middle of the street, and it was crazy because all the people driving on the streets and stuff had no idea what was going on,
Just a
and there's
flood of
just
people.
exactly there's like thousands of people just flooding out in the middle of the streets in the middle of Las Vegas, and there's sirens and fire engines and cop cars and this and that, ambulances all coming every which way, and there was just I think confusion and just chaos. I think chaos would be the number one thing to describe like that event for me. That kind of incident was just chaotic and not knowing what's happening. Like what I thought was happening was different than what we ended up figuring out was actually happening as far as like where the shooter was and what was going on. Very different than what my perception of what was going on was.
Well, thank you for sharing this. 'Cause I when you're explaining it, one of my first thoughts is you see it on TV and movies all the time where like things like this are reproduced, right? Where something happens with a crowd and there's like confusion at first, but then something that seems like it clicks for somebody, and then everybody follows that person. They take that lead, wherever they're running or escaping. When you had that moment, what was that thought of like, oh shit, something's off here? Was it that you need to run? Was it you've got to like help and protect people? Like what was going through your mind during that?
So there's two moments really. The first one is like I kind of mentioned, like the not understanding what's happening, and then all of a sudden realizing, oh, like we're getting shot at right now. This is what's happening. We're literally in those situations that you hear about but never think that it's going to happen to you. And then as we started kind of moving, I like the whole crowd was just kind of moving that one direction. And then once the shots kind of like were hitting our side a bit and everybody dropped to the ground, there was another moment where like I said, I kind of poked my head up and I looked in the direction to the west, like of where I thought the shots were coming from. And I kind of in my head, I took a picture of like what I thought was happening. And what I thought was happening was on the west side of the venue towards like where the Mandalay Bay was, there was two or three different entrance exits to the festival. That's where all the entrances and exits were on that side. And in my head, I pictured, okay, there's like, this is like a terrorist attack or something. And there's like multiple people coming in with like whatever machine guns they have, because it was clearly like automatic gunfire. And they're
Sure.
coming in on foot and they're like pushing in to the festival towards us. That was what I pictured in my head. And my thought was like, I got to get my friends like out of here. So kind of like you said, the lead thing, like I said, like, we're going this way. Don't stop running. Like, this is what's happening. You know what I mean? Like, do not stop. I'm going to be behind you. Just go, basically. And that's kind of what happened. So, yeah, like you're saying, there's kind of like somebody in those situations, there's always going to be someone that can hopefully, like, if people don't know what to do, like, hopefully snap you out of it and just kind of get people moving or going in a direction they need to go or whatever it happens to be. Because in that moment, it's hard and everybody reacts differently. Some people are going to just not know what to do and they're going to just freeze up. Some people are going to run. Some people are going to fight. Some people are going to do whatever. It just depends on the person and the situation. I could do different things in different situations. You never know.
Sure. It's that
But
it's
that's
that
kind
fight
of
or
like,
flight kind of.
that's what that thought process was like that moment. And it's all like, that all happened. Everything I just told you happened in like 1 second flat. It's like this is what's going on. Boom. Like this is what we're
Yeah.
doing. Go. And then I even like, even when we were a block away, I was still like, keep going, keep going. Because you could
Yeah.
still, we were a block away and you could still hear it. It was still happening. I remember one of the girls was like, why is this still like, why are they still going? Like, how is this still happening? Like, how is that still going on, for such a long time? So I was kind of just that, like, keep going. We're not stopping because there's no reason to be anywhere near what's going on over there.
Yeah. And up to that point, you didn't have like any military or police background or experience, right?
No, not at the time. Not
Have
at the time.
it's like when you're processing this, because a lot of this sounds, and I really don't mean to compare the two, so I hope it's not taken out of context. But it sounds like what we go through on a paintball field, where you just have to like make snap judgment instincts in like without even thinking about it sometimes. After doing this, podcast now, for this will be the 51st episode, a lot of people talk about so much of what they've experienced their life with making certain decisions really quickly, they've attributed it back to the sport. Has that ever connected for you? That like maybe part of what you went through playing paintball those years helped you make that snap judgment?
I never thought about it like that. I think I wouldn't say I could see how people would maybe get, a little butthurt by you like comparing that kind of stuff, but I think there maybe is something to just the fact that there is an adrenaline component to paintball, There's like a big adrenaline component. And even when you play for years, things can happen where in the moment you're just like, oh, like your adrenaline spikes because like, oh, you didn't know that guy was like 2 feet away from you didn't know like
Yeah,
you didn't know it was a poison and like there's someone else shooting right next to your head and you didn't know they were there and you need to, it's like
it's lots
maybe
of
I don't
process.
know. I never really thought about that, but it's certainly possible that that helped a little bit, like just knowing, feeling the adrenaline and knowing that's okay, and just being able to think quickly about like what's happening and just make a decision and go, because that's what paintball is, honestly. It's controlling your excitement and arousal level and being able to make decisions while not like being slow and lazy out there, It's like managing your emotions and your thoughts to make decisions.
It's one of the most important skills on the pro level is to be able to
Yeah.
do that, as you ascend the ranks.
And that's
Um,
why I think experience, like, I think that's part of the reason why guys like Ryan Greenspan and Alex and Yosh and all the guys like Alex Goldman and Marcelo like can play for such a long time and be able to be so good is because that's like the biggest thing. I think like if you have like just the basic physical requisites to be able to do a job on the field, it's all just mental from that point,
yeah,
And we
yeah,
see it all the time on the pro field. Like it's mentally, that's the difference between the pros and semi-pro and division 2, 3, 4, whatever you want to call it. That's the
yeah,
biggest thing.
yeah, totally. Um, so shortly after this event, you were featured on a huge website. You were on a billboard.com article. And in that article, I'll share it in the link for people to go check it out after. But you had talked about how this tragedy sort of catapulted your next career move. Tell us about that.
Yeah. And it's funny because I actually, when the other day when you mentioned that, I was like, oh yeah, because I sometimes forget that I did those interviews. Because it just, I don't know, it's part of the whole like just thing, the whole shooting thing. It just kind of is part of that whole thing, and sometimes I just forget about it. Yeah. So after the shooting, so at the time, what I was doing was very different. I was in like the fitness and health and wellness field. That's what I went to college for. I was working in the field, doing a few different jobs in that kind of realm, and I was helping people, But after the shooting, because of some other stuff that I'd experienced when I was younger too, um, I thought about, okay, maybe I want to do something else, or I could tell I wanted to do something else because of it. And I was thinking about like military, police, fire, basically all the public safety service type jobs like that, where it's just a different animal in terms of like helping people. Most of us are, our jobs, if we're not in the fire service or police or anything, you're providing service or helping people. But I felt like I want to do something more. Just I don't know, important's not the right word for it, but like to me, more important. Something that just meant
Yeah.
a little bit more. Um, and so eventually, pretty much, probably 2 months later or so, we had a fire out here in Ventura County in California, the Thomas Fire, And that was kind of when I made the decision, you know what, that's it. Like, that's it. It's something I thought about when I was in college for a little bit, and when I was a kid for a while, was trying to be a firefighter. And then so that was what I decided on, basically. I decided, hey, I want to try to get into the fire service, and started taking EMT class and college, you know, even though I'd already graduated college, started taking like fire science classes, and kind of told all my jobs, like, hey, I'm going to be starting to kind of like try to transition into a different field. And everybody was really supportive of it. So that was cool. And just started working on the whole process of trying to do something new, you know?
Wow. What a great way to take like such a tragic event in your life and in so many people's lives that will forever change their course of their life, and then to do something now where you're helping give back and essentially saving people's lives. That's insanely admirable of what you did.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I don't always look at it like that. I think because I don't know, it just seems like to me, I just wanted to, it just helped me make a decision, you know, like a life decision that I'm, you know, always had thought about. But it was like you said, the word catalyst, it was like the thing that made me start to question and think like I wanted to do something different, you know, just
Yeah.
with my career and my life. And that was it. You know, I figured out that's what I want to do, and locked in on it, you know. And yeah, like
Yeah.
it is kind of taking that, and I was able to kind of take that and use it as like motivation, you know, and use it as like this event did something for me, and not that, you know, this thing that happened that was really bad and a lot of people died and this and that is not just like a bad thing for me individually. It's like on a personal level for me, it's something that allowed me to grow and do something, you know, that I ended up being super passionate about, you know. And that's part of the grieving process, you know. If you can take that stuff and not look at it like it's only bad, it will help you, you know, like process and you know, just grieve things in a different way.
Yeah, I mean, grief is something, gosh, that's a topic I could talk about for so long. Because I think at this point, when this comes out, it'll be a few weeks at this point, but I had, when my book came out, again, not to compare the two events, but since we're talking about grief, the day that my book came out, about 4 hours before that, my grandpa passed away, who was like my father figure, growing up. And, through all the instant grief that comes with it, at some point it clicked of like, man, like it's now up to me to like make sure I'm continuing his legacy and like carrying things on. And so like it was a similar thought of, I don't want to wallow in this and just be sad all the time. Like, how can I turn this into something positive?
Yeah.
And I think that it's a great way for people to, if they're going through some type of grief or tragedy, to do that.
And you said it kind of took some time. How long did it take for you to like for that to click?
Gosh, probably. So the book came out. It actually was supposed to come out on 10/10, October 10th, a Friday, but for whatever reason, Amazon decided to launch it like a day early. And so my grandpa
Weird.
passed.
I don't
Yeah,
know
it
how
was
that
good.
works, but that sounds weird.
Yeah, yeah. Because like it was in Discord, and someone's like, "Hey, I just ordered your book," and I'm like, "No, you didn't. It's not out yet." And he sent his screenshot.
Like,
I'm
what?
like,
How is that
"Oh shit."
possible? Yeah.
Yeah, and so like I'm sitting on the couch with my wife, and like I'm obviously crying and processing it, and then it just clicked of like, man, I need to keep going forward with all this. Like I've got to keep going forward with a book release and almost honor him in that way, because he would have wanted me to not like be sad and stop my life. And so throughout that whole entire weekend, like the next day, Amanda had just planned and so many incredible things. Like she had gotten balloons that had, the book name, and like she had confetti cannon. She planned a really nice like celebration dinner. And she was like, "Do you still want to go forward with all of this?" And I said yes, but I think I felt guilty saying yes, and I wanted to like continue.
Mm.
And so I struggled going back and forth of, I want to go forward with this, but I also feel like I shouldn't. And then I think, I mean, to come back to your question, I think that Saturday or Sunday, so about 3 days after, it just kind of clicked for me of like, I need to move forward and like honor him in this way. And this is how I'm going to do it, is by telling his story like through the book. And he's a big part of that. Like there's a chapter in there that's talks about how much he was inspiring to me and how he helped, kind of change my life as a creator. And so it just kind of clicked for me within a few days.
Yeah, I was just curious because I didn't know if that meant like it was a month later or it was the next day or whatever it is. Because it's not always instant for any, there's like the stages, right, that you go through. Sometimes a year later,
Yeah.
you feel a certain thing and something happens and it clicks, and whether it's a good or bad thing, so I'm always just interested to see sometimes how people's
Yeah.
processes work when it comes to this kind of stuff.
Yeah. Everyone's is different. Right. And I talked about this a lot on my episode with the one before this, with Amanda, because she asked me a bunch of questions about this. And gosh, it was so oddly and like eerily similar because 3 years ago, almost pretty, within a month of the date, I lost my mom. And I lost her to cancer. And it was, I think she passed like a week before my first ever World Cup. And like that was the World Cup, my first time shooting professional paintball. That was my Dynasty children's book coming out that weekend. And so that was a surreal time. And then fast forward to this year, I knew my grandpa was not doing well because I was able to FaceTime him the day before to essentially say goodbyes. But I was like, holy cow, I'm putting out another book and another prominent person in my life is like, I'm about to lose that.
Mm.
So these two insanely high moments in my life were like also attached to two of the lowest moments of my life. And so it just took a little bit after my mom's to realize like I've got to continue going forward and honoring her through this. And I think going through that helped me through this last book launch too. So just a wild experience.
It's funny, life does that sometimes, doesn't it?
It
It's
does.
like it just has a weird way of doing a lot of stuff like that, where good things sometimes are coincide with bad things happening, or it
Yeah.
just always has there's always a way of getting humbled too. It's funny how life works. Not that that's what was happening for you, but it's just funny or interesting how things happen a lot with life, like that.
Yeah, totally. And transitioning back to you, I think after you became a firefighter, was it shortly after, like a year after, you were also part of another shooting. I think the Thousand Oaks shooting is what it's synonymous for. Is that right?
Yeah, so it's
It's
kind of
crazy.
known as like the borderline shooting because of the place, the bar. So like I mentioned, the whole reason I was even at Vegas was because of like this country music and like,
Yeah.
dancing, line dancing, partner dancing, two-step community that I was like so well involved in, basically since 2013.
Yeah.
Um, and the place that I started going to, and there was like my home base kind of, and I even worked there as a promoter up until the shooting, was called Borderline Bar and Grill. It's in Thousand Oaks. It's actually like literally 5 minutes away from where I live now. Um, it's actually kind of part of the reason I even moved to Thousand Oaks, because the reason I have so many friends out here now is because of this place.
Wow.
Um, yeah, so to give you like a little more background on it, to paint the picture, um, like between 2013 and then November 7th, 2018, when now this other big event happens, I had been there somewhere between like 500 and 600 times. Um, I was there like everyone, like 2 or 3 times a week for basically 5.5+ years. So this place, Borderline, I'll just refer to it as Borderline, was like kind of like a second home for me, and not just me, but like hundreds and hundreds of other people that always, like, we call them, regulars. Like there was hundreds of us from the Ventura County, LA County area that would go to this place all the time and all knew each other. And it was like the biggest, just like, kind of like paintball is, or any sport. It's almost like a sport where you just like, you walk in the building and hundreds of people, and they're all your, a lot of your friends, and it's just like a crazy unique atmosphere. And so because of that, I was in Vegas, and then 13 months later, so that was October 1st, 2017, and then so November 7th, 2018, and this was, like you said, after I had started trying to get into the fire service. And at the time, I was working for like a private fire department,
Yeah.
not for like a municipality, like a city or county. So I was just kind of getting my foot in the door in the fire service. I had taken my EMT, but yeah, so I was at Borderline. It was a Wednesday night, and a guy who was a former U.S. Marine machine gunner walked in and started killing a bunch of my friends. Basically, is how, that's the gist of it. Obviously, depending on how much detail you want me to go into, we talked about, like, I do a presentation on it, so I'm comfortable talking about it, and some of the details of what happened. But that's kind of whatever you want is how deep I can go on that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we have to go into like some of the gruesome parts of it. I think for me, when I had figured this out about you, it was, my mind went right to like, holy cow, you just experienced a mass shooting that's going to go down in history forever. Or a part of that kind of catapulted your career into being a firefighter, and then now a year later, you're part of another mass shooting. So like, I think it was that triangle effect of, one, how does that affect you, right?
Yeah.
Like, how do you even process that? And then how do you use all of those events to still move forward in your life?
Yeah, and that's a good question, because it's a pretty unique. We call it like a club. Like, we're in a pretty, those of us, because I wasn't the only one that was at Vegas and then was at Borderline. I don't know the exact number. I would say it's somewhere in like the neighborhood of like 40 or 50 at least of us that
Is
were
that
at
some of
both.
the folks in this picture that I just brought
Yeah,
up?
I would say a lot of the people in that picture. So this is a picture taken. It was either a few days or sometime within a week after the shooting, um, at a friend's house where a bunch of us just met up. Because when something like this happens, and this is part of your question of like, how do you deal with these things?
Yeah.
Um, it really helps to have a community of people that are experiencing the same things, whether they were there or not. They're in some way involved, like in the grieving process, um, and that you can rely on, and that, everybody's grief stages are different, but everybody's going through similar things at the same time. And so that was like that's one of the biggest things that helped me, along with, like you're saying, turning those things and like, boom, okay, like, I'm going to use this to motivate me, like, to have a career now in the fire service. And then at the time, something that helped me with the second shooting was that myself and one of my buddies, who now actually works for Reno Fire Department, once we got out of the building, we had a guy with a gunshot wound to the chest in the parking lot who we helped. And he ends up being the only guy basically with like a direct gunshot wound. There was somebody else that had a shrapnel wound, but he's the only person with a direct gunshot wound that survived that night. So like, we look at that as like, for us, like, at least we did something positive, like in that time of so much negativity of like that bad thing that was happening. We
Yeah.
feel like at least like we did something. We helped somebody. We tried to do something to, make the situation better for somebody, and that helps, me, and helps him, deal with that stuff, because a bunch of our friends got killed.
Yeah.
um and the community, like, it's, the community aspect of it. When you I almost Me and my friends have talked about this. There's people that were in Vegas that they were there maybe with their husband or wife or their girlfriend or boyfriend, and that's it. And they didn't have 100 friends that were also there, that when they went home, they were still able to see them and talk to them and like go through that together. And that's what I was able to do, and all my friends were able to do. We were able to have that community with each other. And then my friends that, there was people that were calling me from borderline, not that they were at borderline at the time, but like that from my friends from borderline that were calling me while we were still running away in Vegas, because they had already heard what was happening. Because it was like, social media, it's instant. People hear
Yeah.
like immediately. And I was getting phone calls as like before I even got to, like to the place where I stopped running at, it was like, that's how, like much of a community that whole, that place was for me, the Borderline Bar and Grill place. So that's what helps a lot too, is using that stuff, like for me personally,
Yeah.
of like, hey, like I'm gonna use this to make me better and try to grow from it, but also having that huge support network of hundreds of people that were all going through a huge grieving process together. And we still go through it. Like there's things that still happen,
I'm
or
sure.
sometimes somebody just has a bad day, like time does help, but sometimes I still have a day where I think about it a lot, or it's on my mind, whether it's the anniversary or not the anniversary, and other people have the same thing. Obviously, it gets easier, so to speak, but there's still sometimes stuff comes up, and I can always there's always people for me to talk to. And then a big thing too is um, like the first shooting, I didn't go to therapy at all. I didn't have a therapist. And then after the second one, I was like, all right, I need to go. I need to go see a therapist. Like, I need to see what this. I've never done it before, so it's like intimidating, or you like people have that stigma of like something's wrong with you if you go to a therapist or you have a psychiatrist or whatever you want to call it. But that for me was a big like eye-opening thing of like, oh, this is like extremely beneficial, you know. Um, so it kind of just opened up new ways where like if I didn't know how good therapy can be for trying to work through whether it's grieving stuff or like just personal things you're trying to work on or things that you struggle with or whatever it is, like therapy is a great way to productively try to work through that stuff and try to get better as a person, in a lot of different ways. So that's something like if I wouldn't have gone through these things, I wouldn't know about that either. I wouldn't have kind of forced myself to experience what that's like and be able to. I think that's helped me become a lot more aware of myself and more empathetic towards other people and what other people are going through, and not being judgmental about what other people are going through, because you just don't know. Kind of going on a tangent, but you never know what somebody's dealing with, so there's no reason to judge anybody for that kind of stuff.
Yeah, and sometimes it takes a life altering event to have that radical shift in your brain of you never truly know what someone's going through. Like if someone's cutting you off on the highway or something, like maybe they're just got a phone call that a loved one is minutes away from passing and they are just flying to try to say goodbye. Like, or maybe there's a pregnant, like you truly don't know what people are going through. And so to try to not have that judgment, I think it's so helpful. Um, One of the questions I was going to ask you that you just beautifully answered was, how do you process this? Or like if someone went through anything similar or had some type of tragedy in their life, it sounds like your two takeaways were having a community and then also talking to somebody.
Yeah. Those are the big things. And then one is also, the people that weren't actively a part of it. Like there's people I work with and that are my friends now that they weren't in my life at that time, and they weren't a part of that. But when they hear about it, or when I, open up a little bit about it and talk to them about like some of the things that have happened, um, I have a lot of people that are my friends and coworkers that are really supportive of me, in that stuff, in that way. Like if I'm feeling a certain way or I'm not having a great day, like everybody that I associate with is like really cool about, just being a
Understanding.
good person about it, and just being cool about it. And that's something that helps too. Like if you're around people just in your life in general, like maybe they weren't there for you in
Yeah.
that time when that thing happened to you, but you have people around you that are just good people. Like you just, you try to attract, you know, good people in your around you, that helps too. Because, you know, if someone just doesn't know you, that thing about you, and they, you know, they treat you a certain way, um, because you're dealing with some difficult stuff, then that's more, you know, that can be a reflection of like, maybe you should, you know, spend your time with different people. That's kind of not a great answer, but it's something that helps me. Is like, I work with, and my, you know, friends that are newer, from not from that time, are so like, everybody's good people, and that helps too, because when I talk about it with them, it's not like, even though they can't understand it, they understand the importance of, like I said, like being empathetic and not being judgmental to people, and just hearing people out, you know. I feel like you're just seeing your podcast and the stuff you talk about. I have to order your book still. That's on my to-do list.
Got to do it.
Um, I watched, like I told you, I watched the Spick and Span episode
Mhm.
from this week, and hearing you guys talk about some of that stuff and a lot of that like deeper level internal stuff that goes on. I'm excited to read it, because, you know, you're one of those people that is very aware and empathetic to about yourself and other people and stuff like that, and kind of, like I said, like attracting people that are just good people. I feel like, you know, just knowing you now, like I'm pretty comfortable that in knowing that, you know, you're somebody that I could talk to about stuff, and it's gonna be just like talking to a friend of mine that I've known for a long time, you know.
Yeah. That means a lot. Thank you for that. And that's, yeah, I don't want to make this about me or my podcast, but that's exactly why I'm doing this, is that there's just such a power in a conversation, especially when somebody's going through something, right? And like, I've had on guests all the way from, you know, having drinking issues to depression to marital issues to now, you know, going through some pretty tragic events that you have. And every time one of my guests opens up about what they're going through, there's every single time there's at least one person either in the comments publicly or that sends me a DM or sends the guest a DM of like, hey, this episode helped me because of, right? And so like, someone's going to listen to this episode of what you're going through or what you went through, and they're going to relate to it, and you're going to help change their life in some way. And maybe it's that person is going to go into therapy, and start talking to somebody. But it's so important what you're doing, coming on, opening up and talking about this. So I truly can't thank you enough.
And you're right, because like I mentioned before, obviously it's not quite as like deep of a subject per se, but because of your podcast, I had the confidence to, you know, because I didn't know how it works. Like, who should I talk to?
Yeah.
Who is even in charge of, like, how does the whole application process? Because I looked up the application and saw like what it is, but I don't know, like, is someone even going to look at it, or like, am I going to submit this application for pro media and they're just going to be like, I don't know who this guy is, you know? But then watching your episode, and it was something I was like actively like thinking about and worried about, like, oh, how am I going to get, you know, this pro media pass? Like, how am I going to get back on the field?
Yeah.
Um, and it was kind of like, once I watched that episode with you and Alex talking about what the process is like, and seeing his thought process and how he looks, at the application process, and that he's just looking for, you know, what your quality of work is, you know, then I took the time. I took like 2 or 3 hours, wrote out this big long email, gave him all the context of like my history in the sport, all of it, sent him a list of all the videos, that I made before, so he could kind of get the historical aspect of it, and then sent him all my new stuff, and felt good about it. Like, cause I was confident, like, hey, like, I understand what he's looking for now.
Yeah.
And your episode gave me the confidence to like just send the email, and it's going to be just fine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then look what happened because of that. So it's something like, it's not as deep, obviously, as we're like some of the stuff we're talking about, but internally, I was like worried about it and thinking about like, oh, how am I going to navigate this situation? And because of
Yeah.
your podcast, I knew what to do. You know, I knew what to do, how I was going to do it, and now it led to me being back kind of in that pro media club that, you know, I was looking to try to get back into when I first came back to the sport. So you're right. All this stuff, even if it's just one person, it can make a pretty big difference, because I would have never met you in person. I think I did send you a message like, hey, I saw your episode, and I sent an email to Alex because of what you guys talked about and this and that. And that was
Yeah.
like the first communication I had with you. That was probably getting close to a year now, whenever that episode came out. So you're right. It does. All that stuff matters. And there's a big butterfly effect. How much stuff wouldn't have happened now that if you hadn't have done that episode and talked about that stuff with Alex. So
You wouldn't
I
be in
wouldn't be
this
here. I wouldn't be here
today.
right now.
Yeah, totally.
I wouldn't be here right now. So it's cool.
Yeah. Wild, man. Well, again, thanks for opening up about it, all of this. And the one last thing I want to touch on, because I think it's really important, going through everything that you went through. You mentioned in preparation of the show that you now, around the anniversary every year, you give a presentation to your coworkers about this event. And I can imagine that's probably a little therapeutic for you in a way. But why do that presentation, and what's the context of that presentation for your coworkers?
Yeah. So some kind of background on like how I started out with that. Um, Before I worked, so now I work for um, Orange County Fire Authority. Before that, I worked for Ventura County Fire Department. Um, and so for Ventura County back then, I was on what's called a hand crew, where I'm working usually with around like 20 people or so every day that are like on my crew, you would call it. Um, and we spend a lot of time together. That's something that I think you'll hear from a lot of people that work in the fire services. Like, you spend a lot of time around these people and you get pretty close. Um, so it was a combination of how I first came about with doing this presentation, of like wanting to use it kind of as like to help me like process things and go through, and like almost for me it was almost like really like filing away of like everything that happened in my brain, putting it on like on paper, so to speak, which is it's a PowerPoint that I do, with like I built a whole like map and diagram of the bar, like with MS Paint. I built like a whole diagram of the inside. I found old pictures, so that like when at the start of the presentation, like I'm orienting them, like whoever I'm giving it to, like to what it looked like inside, pictures of it, like what the streets were outside the parking lot, what it all looked like. And so for me, I think part of that is like I said, kind of like filing away and just like setting that stuff in my head of like, this is what happened. You know what I mean? Like, this is everything I know about what happened. Because when you're dealing with trauma, like it helps your brain to just fully understand like everything that happened to you when you dealt with that traumatic event. That was part of it. But then another part of it was like, I spend a lot of time with these people, and I think it'll help everybody if, and their relationship with me and my relationship with them and our relationship together as a crew, if I am vulnerable and I share a lot of like extremely vivid detail about what happened. It usually takes me at least 45 minutes to an hour basically to talk about the event from beginning to end. That's how much detail I go into. So I talk about a lot of stuff and each individual thing that happened, like in a chronological order. Just my story, and kind of coupled together with other people who were inside at the same time, like a lot of little details that were happening.
Yeah.
And if I share that, then they're going to know me better, and they're going to be more comfortable sharing stuff with me that maybe they wouldn't have before. And we're all just going to have a better dynamic, and we're all going to be closer. So that was a big part of it too, is like, if I share something really personal, then they're going to be more comfortable with me, and they're going to know something about me, and maybe some things that I've been through that they didn't know or wouldn't know before. A lot of my coworkers have said stuff like, man, I just didn't realize, like, compared to the Vegas shooting, like how intimate, or like how personal the borderline shooting was for you, because of like where it was, my relationship with that place, like that place being a home for me, and like all my friends being there and all that kind of stuff, like how much different it was than like the Vegas shooting, which is more of just like a chaotic, not knowing what's going on type of traumatic experience. Um, so yeah, that's really like the main reasons why I do it. And then what that looks like I said, is like I go up, I give a background on like my relationship with mass shootings, and then I also use it as like, because I'm in the fire service, and mass shootings are something that are, not for every single person that works in the fire service, but they are a part of what, either now or in the future, your job could entail is responding to something
Sure.
like that. I try to also use it a little bit of like, hey, like, this is what you might be walking into if, if you are responding, and need to, you know, be there to help somebody, like this is what you might be looking at, or this is what, you can imagine it might be happening to the people that you're going to treat or that you're going to see. And then also like in your own personal lives, like I talk about some things that I think about just when I go to music festivals or when I go to, to country bars or regular restaurants or this and that, just little things like that I keep in my head of like to think about, because you never know when you're possibly going to be put in that position. Because honestly, I will tell you a story. Um, Basically, 1 year after the Vegas shooting, Jason Aldean did like um, a concert at the San Manuel Amphitheater out here in San Bernardino. And a lot of people that were at the Vegas shooting, not just my group, but like throughout California and the Southwest, all wanted to go to that because it was like the redemption. A lot of people called it like that's the redemption because it happened. The Vegas shooting happened during his set at Route
Yeah.
91.
Yep.
And for a lot of people, it was like a healing thing. They wanted to go and like finish the set that we like missed because of what happened. And I remember one of my friends was having kind of like a breakdown um, during his set. And I was like, hey, it's never going to happen to us again. Like it already happened. Like there's no way anything like that is ever going to happen to us again. Like we already went through it. Like it's over. And then like a month and a half later, guess what? It does happen again. So that's I say it's funny. It's not funny, but I try to have the outlook of like I'm just kind of like a magnet. Things just happen to me. A lot of my coworkers will say like, "Man, I don't want to hang out with you. I
Sure.
don't want to hang out with you off duty. Stuff, bad stuff just happens." Because there's even some more stuff that's happened to me too. That's pretty gnarly too. That guys are like, "What?" It's like, how is that possible that happened? Like all these things have you've seen or experienced. Like, dang, dude, you're just like a dark cloud. So I look at it as kind of funny like that, even though to other people they might think that's weird. Um, but it's just one of those things. It's like you can either look at things and let them tear you down. I remember one of my supervisors where I work now a couple years ago was like, I try to understand you talking to me, like try to understand how you can go through all this stuff and not just want to like hide in a like drown yourself in a bottle or like just go down a dark path. He's like, I try to understand like your thought process and how you look at things because he was just like, man, it's crazy to see the way you take things sometimes and turn them or at least use them in positive ways. um yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so many people would go down, different paths, really dark and scary paths. And so for you that have gone through so much, be able to spin that and, still try to find some light, in the tunnel and use it for good. It's insanely admirable. And so I certainly appreciate you coming on and opening up about this. Yeah, because I know I've got other firefighters who are big fans of the show that listen. We had Chris Caputo on a few months back, who's a FDNY. I've got a local guy here in Austin that plays for Austin Oni, who's just became a firefighter. And he's going through every few weeks. I'll talk to him, and he's like, I pushed my first epi, or like I just resuscitated somebody for the first time, and like what an experience.
Yeah, it is. It's crazy. And um it's cool to do something where you get to like experience stuff like that where
Yeah.
you're seeing the other end of it, because I think, and I've talked about this, of like one of the reasons I wanted to do like be in this field is like I've been on the other end of those 911 calls multiple times before, and it's cool now to be on the other side of it, you know.
For
um
sure.
it's just a cool experience to be on the other side of that and thinking like when I, you know, do things at work that somebody's looking at me the same way I looked at first responders, you know, when I was in those situations.
Yeah.
And like you said, it's not to say that, you know, even though I try to make positives out of negatives, that there aren't, you know, there's dark times, and there's times where things happen and things remind you of certain things, or you just something about the way, like I can tell you, when the sun starts getting lower in the sky and it feels like fall, to me it just feels like the time around when the Vegas shooting happened. And because it was both during fall, it was October and November. When it gets to this time of year, like October, November, December, it just feels more to me like the time of year when these things happen. I can just feel it. And I've a bunch of my friends have said the same thing. Yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting, and it's not something that, you know, to say like you don't experience those things or that things don't sometimes pop up would just be, you know, for me at least, that would be a lie. But it's just trying to deal with them in the best way that I can, and me and my friends can together. You know, that
Yeah.
makes it better.
Totally. You know, and it reminds me of there's a song that, like, when I first heard it, I just fell in love with it. And like the lyrics that stand out, there's like two lines in it, and it's like, thank you for sunshine, thank you for rain, thank you for joy, thank you for pain. And like they exist together. Like you have to have both together. You can't have sunshine without rain. You know, you can't have one without the other. You can't appreciate one without the other.
Yeah, it's just
Uh,
life, right?
yeah.
It's just that's just how life is, and that's how it's kind of like we talked about earlier with like whether it's not knowing like how good something was until it's gone, or just
Yeah.
it's what makes you really appreciate like whether it's an accomplishment or like a time in your life that's really good, or just something really good happening to you, that you really appreciate that more because you know you know what it's like to be really on the other end of the spectrum, you know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly. Well, Nick, this has been awesome, man. I've got a closing tradition that I do at the end of all my podcasts, where the previous guest will leave a question for next week's guest, and they will not know who the guest is, and so it's a really cool
Mm,
way to tie in each guest. And
cool.
so
Yeah, let's
the
do it.
yeah, I didn't do a question for mine just because I knew who was coming on, and so the question is going to be actually from Mike Hinman, which is crazy because like he was back when you were shooting, you know,
Yep.
film back then. He was the hot guy. His question for you, it's super simple, but it'll be cool to hear your take on it. How do we grow paintball?
Ooh, you know, and this has been something, it's been a hot topic, right? Because of the ESPN thing.
Yeah.
Um, and I was watching the PTG, I think it was last week with Danny Lincoln, and they talked about it a lot. And I obviously at like the show I watched the most, like to get my paintball like news and information is the Spick and Span show. I would
Yeah.
say like most consistently. One because like those guys are just I think they're hilarious,
Yeah.
and two because they talk about this all the time too. They talk about how like different ideas and how to grow the sport.
Yeah.
And you know, before I answer that directly, there's something I noticed, and I'm sure you've heard before about the way content and just social media aspect of paintball works right now. And everything is very, even though it seems really centralized with Instagram, and I'm not on TikTok, but I know TikTok's a thing, and YouTube. I think everything is actually very split apart.
Mm.
Like people, there's so much content and there's so much coming out from so many different areas that the majority of the people in the sport are not even seeing any of it. Um, Whereas before, back in the day, if someone was coming out with content on paintball, because obviously it was harder to do, you would see it because it was on PB Nation,
Yeah.
um, and you would know like there was like this, the buzz within the sport was felt within the entire sport. I feel like, and I think now because of the way the social media stuff works, everything is more. I don't want to use the term clicky, but it's like different areas are not seeing stuff that's happening in other areas as much as like it used to be in the past. And so I think it makes paintball sometimes feel not as unified. Like I mentioned that word earlier, like not as centralized as it used to, which in terms of growing the sport into new eyes, maybe isn't the biggest factor. But I think as far as like within the sport, like people staying attentive and knowing like everything that's going on, I think it's actually harder now in a way. Even though there's so much content, there's so many ways to find out like who's playing and who's practicing, and we know this video is coming out and that's coming out. I think that aspect of it is different. But in terms of growing the sport, I actually agree. Can't remember who said this. It might have been Danny. But I actually like the 5-man format.
Yeah.
I like the X Ball format. And I agreed with what he said when he said, even though it requires a little bit more of knowledge, like in the game, if you just know a little bit about the game, I think the 5-man X Ball format is superior in terms of like long-term, like longevity of like keeping people interested.
Sure.
But I think with the 3-man format, there is something there from a broadcast perspective, because I think if we start changing the 5-man X Ball format too much to meet like the broadcast kind of like the speed and everything like that, I think it will take away from it. I would say the biggest thing is Kyle Berry said this, and I can't remember which show this was on, but I think it comes down to creating an environment at the lowest level. And I know Mike Hinman has also talked about this, that makes people not intimidated to come back. And as much as I love like my buddy Dave and my buddy Paul, they own and run the violence brand, you know, as much as I love like that aspect of paintball and like the hate and like, you know, let's do some damage to the guys on the other end of the field. I think from a growth perspective, that mentality, when you're talking about playing with newer players and trying to bring new people into the game, isn't always going to be the best. So I think just creating a cool environment and teaching people about like the community that we have in paintball, because that's what brought me back just as much as me wanting to film again and make videos again and be on the pro field, is being a part of the community. Like that's something that I missed the most about it, is that aspect of it. So I think if we can do a better job of showing people like how cool this community is and how great it can be and improve, literally like change your life, you know, like my life is completely different because I played paintball. I think that would help more so than like choosing a specific format or rule changes or this or that. I think what it comes down to, just like I think like CrossFit did this when they blew up.
Yeah.
Was like they started emphasizing the community aspect of CrossFit and not just the working out. Like it's not necessarily like they didn't advertise as much like these are the best workouts and you're going to get in the best shape. It became a lot more about what the community has to offer you, and that's when CrossFit like exploded in terms of popularity around the country and around the world. So I think trying to, you know, and I don't necessarily know the best way to do that, to show off the community or try to emphasize that more. I wouldn't say that's my field of expertise, but I think if we're being honest about how to really get more people involved, because it's an expensive sport and it's not like basketball where I can just go to LA Fitness or 24-hour Fitness or a park and go play whoever's there. It does take time and it takes energy. So to get people to want to invest the time, energy, and money, I think there has to be a community aspect of it that brings people in and makes them stay, you know?
That might be one of the best answers I've heard in a really long time of how to grow it. And you're spot on, because I mean, we could just rattle off the list of sports and or hobbies that have exploded focusing on the community, right? Like you're spot on. CrossFit exploded, not because, hey, do these workouts, it's because they made a community. Running has exploded in the past decade or two by all these running clubs.
That's true, yeah. There are a lot of running clubs now that I never 20. I don't know. 15 years ago, I never heard of a running club.
Yeah, like
Yeah,
even like think of like a brewery. They're doing running clubs, and so they're getting people who typically aren't runners to come run, but they want to be there for the social aspect of the community afterwards. And so like the community, you hear it time and time again for people that are coming back into the sport. It's I want to come back to the community. So I think you're spot on. We've got to figure out how to showcase that more, not necessarily the game. The game is the thing, right? The game is the workout, the running, whatever it is. But
it's the
how do we?
activity. Yeah,
Yeah, it's the activity that
yeah,
leads to the community. A great answer.
yeah. And like I said, I don't know. I honestly, I'd be just making something up if I told you how to do that the best way
Sure.
possible. But I think that that has to be at least be part of it.
Yeah.
Like I said, Kyle Mary had a great take on it as far as like just trying to be welcoming and trying to be just being a cool person, to someone that it's just like that story you were telling with that newer photographer, that
Yeah.
was getting on the pro field who I've also met.
Christy. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and even at was her first tournament, was that Texas or was that Cincinnati?
Um, I think she may have shot Cincinnati, but I think it was on a divisional, like
Not
just some
for
division.
not for the Russians.
No.
Um,
What was the last one? So is it Cincinnati? Was it
Texas
Dallas?
was where we were at. Yeah, that was the last tournament.
Yeah, that was her.
Um,
That was her first time, I think, ever shooting on the pro field.
okay, because I do remember her being talking about being nervous. I didn't remember or not if that was her. That was the tournament you were talking about with
Yeah.
Kyle and Ryan about her.
Yes. Yeah. It was
But
Dallas.
you also like you talked about it like just helping, just being there to help somebody. If you guys had been like, figure it out, like I don't know you, then she probably would have never come back. She probably wouldn't want to come, wouldn't want to go film or take photos at Cup because
Exactly.
like she would feel intimidated and she would feel like she's an outcast. If
And
people
yeah.
feel like I think you mentioned it too, like the younger guy you talked to about being afraid to like get shot and come like play,
Yeah.
if that's like the attitude someone has about playing the sport, they're obviously some people are just mentally in a place where they can just deal with that and they'll move past it. But I wouldn't say that that's necessarily everybody. A lot of people are gonna, if they're intimidated by something, they are probably not, especially if it takes a lot of time, energy, and money to go do, they're not gonna want to do it. you
Yeah.
know,
It's fun. Yeah.
you know.
Exactly.
So yeah, the stories you were telling, and honestly, it's funny you said that. This is a tangent, but I remember when I was really young playing the sport, I had the same fear. Like I was sometimes like afraid to make moves or to do stuff because I was like afraid to get shot. Not be necessarily because I was afraid of like making the wrong decision, but sometimes I was like 12 years old, like or 13 years
Yeah.
old. Like I was sometimes just like I didn't want this guy to shoot me 20 times, I was like, so I didn't like run that guy down or make some move to try to break the game open until I got a little older
Yeah.
and, like mentally evolved a little bit. I didn't get past that. So it's funny that you talked about that because I'm sure that's the case with a lot of younger kids that start to play the game. Um, and
I put me
that
on as the
could
case for a
potentially
lot of
make
people.
someone not want to play. I could see had I not had a bunch of friends to play with all the time, that like, and have a really cool core group of people that right away when I started playing, that I had a few buddies, like if they weren't there, I probably would have stopped playing, because I would have just been like, oh, I'm scared, like, so
Exactly.
looking back on it, the community thing was a factor for me too. So,
Yeah. That's what it always comes back to.
yeah.
Nick, the pressure's off. You get to leave a question for next week's guest without knowing who it is.
Ooh. Give me a second.
Sure.
Give me a second. Hmm.
While you're thinking about it, some of the previous questions have been all over the place. They've been very, very specific paintball related ones of like, where would you want to see paintball that we don't have it today? Obviously, how do we grow the sport? Some have been very philosophical and deep of like, who of one of your past loved ones that are no longer around would you want to like have dinner with? the very first question that I ever had on this was from another media guy, Sal Chavez, and his was, is soup a cereal or chowder? And it's like the questions have just been all over the place. So you can take it any direction you want to take it.
I would say let's go the media route. Let's go what is your favorite paintball video of all time? And what is it about that video? Because like if it's someone's favorite, something about that video affected them. You know what I mean? Like in some way, it means something to them. Just like my favorite one that means something to me. And what is it about that video that makes it your favorite, like on a personal level? You know, what is it that is profound to you about that video? Because there's some really good videos out there that I still watch, whether they're old or new. That whether it's because the shots are really cool, or there's just something about, whether it's a story in one of the more like documentary style videos, or just the way the sport is portrayed. There's something about those videos that I watch that makes me come back and watch them over and over again. You know,
because they recreates that feeling.
Yeah, there's like a feeling that I get, or something about it that just means something to me. You know.
Yeah.
So let's go with that, since I'm on the media side. You know?
Gosh, what a great question. I mean, I know the chance we'll see, but it'd be absolutely insane because the person's not going to see this by the time all the stuff is posted. It'd be absolutely insane if they mention one of your videos or something.
That would be pretty sick.
That'd be nuts.
That would be pretty sick. I remember you said, I forget her name, Christy, right?
Yeah.
She said, it's hard. The one thing I'm struggling with at the tournaments right now is trying to remember everybody's name. Because it's still so many new people, like with players. Luckily, they have their names on the back of their jerseys. For the guys I haven't known forever, and all the media members, like I might know like their stage name. Like I know she's STK, but I forget like the real. And she actually came up to me at the tournament on, I think it was day 2 after the 3-man, and she was like, "My husband last night, he saw you like when you were packing up to leave for after the 3-man, and he was like, oh, that guy, he made one of like my favorite videos of all time, you know." And he was like, and I don't know which one it was. I didn't get to talk to him yet about it, but it would be pretty cool. That'd be pretty funny if that happened, because it's pretty cool to hear, like I said, how many people talk about whether it's their favorite or not, but just the fact that, you know, my videos, it meant something to them when they were, you know, in the 2000s, growing up in the sport or whatever it is. So crazy. That would be cool, but I'm not going to put any money on it, because there's a lot of good stuff out there.
You'll have to tune in next week and find out.
Yeah, I will have to find out.
Awesome. Well, thanks again for coming on, and for everyone else tuning in. Thanks for tuning in to another episode of the Shellda Podcast, and we'll catch you next week. See ya.
Thank you. Thanks, Dan. I appreciate you.
My pleasure, man. We'll talk to you soon.